We do our work during the week, we make our money on the weekends as a realtor. And that almost is exactly the same as we do our work during the day, and we make relationships that turn into business at night in the music industry. And you've got to be willing to kind of go outside of the run the business. That's the next level step, that if you're willing to do it, you can have some success in them.
You're back to the Business of Homes podcast. I'm Micheal Conrad, and we're having another episode of I Came for the Music and I Stayed for the Real Estate. Today, we're interviewing Zach Opheim again. Zach is a great agent here in Nashville that I've been fortunate to know for a number of years, and a great guy, and someone who has a slightly different perspective when he came for the music and stayed for the real estate. He wasn't up on stage shaking his tail, and
he
wasn't mixing audio. You know, he was doing something a little different. And so we're going to sort of dig into his background and kind of what got him here and what continues to fuel him. And hopefully he'll give us some great stories today. Zach, thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We've tried to create a platform with this sort of small series to showcase the idea that the music business, which of course in a lot of ways is like the heartbeat of Nashville, right?
Sure. Yeah, definitely still is. Yeah.
The music business has just these wide, incredible range of characters and all of these very visible professions and lots of sort of less visible professions.
Yeah.
And some of these people end up in a real estate. In fact, kind of a medium-sized group of people who kind of came for the music, maybe, and then stayed for real estate. And that there's these interesting translatable skills of maybe you honed these skills or these knowledge in the music world, and then you brought it into real estate. So I'm hoping we can dig into that today. So tell me where you came from, how you got here to old Music City.
Yeah. So born and raised outside of Chicago in Rockford, Illinois. And I came down to Nashville for the first time, truthfully, in between junior and senior year of college. And I interned at an indie record label that's no longer around. And I bar-backed at Legends Corner and Second Fiddle. And I thought, holy cow, this city is awesome. As a 20-year-old, I wasn't even old enough to drink, working behind the bar. And Broadway was different back then, but it sucked you in, right? And I mean, I also was an accounting and finance major, and going, what do I want to do with that? Where am I going to go? And I thought, well, I could do accounting for musicians. And that is the overarching thought that brought me to Nashville. Got into business management is what we call it. A lot of people don't even know that term, right? I was halfway through college in accounting. And if you don't go to college in Nashville, I don't think you're ever exposed to like, hey, this is an option for you as an accountant. I had no idea until I came down to Nashville and was like, oh, business management, what is that? And so I always explain it is we handled everything that goes through the dollar for an artist. We handle their LLCs. We handle their taxes. We pay all their bills. We handled a lot of stuff. And that's a Nashville specific thing. And there are offices across the country now. That's become more of a well-known thing. But when I was getting into it, it was like, oh, let's try and go do that. And that's what brought me to Nashville, essentially.
Amazing. So if this sort of relatively unique profession was born in Nashville, how did you shape it to be your own? Because you don't just like show up on the Broadway street corner and be like, I'm a business manager now. Yeah,
right. And also, I mean, the music industry is an interesting one to break into, and it gets fed a lot by Belmont and Lipscomb and our local universities. But outside of that, trying to break into the music industry, you feel a little bit like an outsider. Like I always joked, like I'm not a Belmont kid. Belmont, they teach their kids, they groom they have the programs set up to help you get started in the music industry, and kudos to them for doing that. That's a great thing. I didn't have that, right? So it was coming down, using relationships, trying to figure out who are the business managers in town, getting involved with that. I was lucky enough and blessed to have an older sister that worked in the industry, made a connection with my old boss. And that is 6 months later, I had a job offered to me. And I consider myself lucky for that. I also had an interesting early first year that most don't. about 4 months after I started, my account manager went on maternity leave. And right before she left for that, the middle assistant said, when she comes back, I'm going to leave. And so my president and vice president came to me at 21 years old and said, will you run the team for the 6 weeks that she's out? And so all of a sudden I got to have conversations with artists, with managers, with booking agents that I never would have been able to as an entry-level assistant. And so that kind of helped, what I like to say, springboard my business management understanding and career a little bit. I have 1 year of tour manager underneath my belt that kind of like sprung in there as an early 24-year-old. I got asked to go out on tour with Brett Eldridge, and I say it kind of fell in my lap. I wasn't looking to go out on tour. I knew tour managers. They needed somebody to go out. They said, why don't you just come out and see how it is? Well, I came out and saw how it was, and it was awesome. It was great. I think Brett was 26 at the time, or was turning 26, 27. I was 24. I was the youngest guy on the bus. We had 11 crew and 1 bus, 1 trailer. Highly, highly, highly. Anybody that wants to learn the music industry, go out on tour. You learn it all, and you learn how the whole thing functions.
Because you got to do it all.
You got to do it all. You're getting exposed to the whole wheel, right? I then was like, I can't do this forever. Came back into business management and did that for a handful more years as an account manager. And I think that both, being in a low-level assistant long enough and being a tour manager, it helped me to be a good account manager. And for me, that transition to real estate was, I don't know where I wanted to go, and I didn't know what I wanted to do long term yet, but I knew I needed to make more money. Right. And so I sat in that for a while, and I started reading books, and I started to have lunches with other people that left the music industry or partially left the music industry. And real estate was the entrepreneur ticket that I was like, I'm a son of an entrepreneur. He's a fast food chain restaurant owner, and grandpa was as well. So I was like, I don't know where that's going to fall in. Right. And so I always knew that I needed to express that. And that was, real estate was my ticket.
That's amazing. I've heard it said that there's sort of 2 worlds in the music business. There's sort of the 9-to-5 world, and then there's the rest of the hours in the day.
Yeah.
What was that your experience?
Yeah. I mean, we used to call it a little bit of like the cool tax, right? It was like music industry. I would say most of the people in the industry would still agree with me that maybe you're underpaid a little bit because you get access to go to some of those shows. And that's great and dandy until you're about your mid-20s and you want to start a family. And you go, well, what if I don't want to go to that exit-in show on a Tuesday night at 11 o'clock anymore? And right, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I don't think there's anything wrong with being able to say that. But there is that, like, a little bit of a cap in the music industry is your network base. I was thankful to be in Solid, which is a networking volunteer nonprofit leadership group within the music industry. That helped me relationship-wise, but I still was hitting this ceiling of going, if I want to have the success that I dream for myself, whatever that number needed to be, and it's different for everybody, I was most likely going to either need to open up my own business management firm or figure out a different line where I could apply more entrepreneurship. I think that the income is a little bit limited to, unless you want to run your own shop, right? I mean, that's part of business as a whole too, but it's probably really prevalent in the music industry.
We've said it before. We'll say it again. All profit is born in risk. And some industries have that bar at different locations on the scale. But if you really want to sort of achieve those higher heights of financial sort of benchmarks, then there's going to be an element of risk. And sometimes that's, I have to give up something or sacrifice something. Maybe I have to risk a personal life, or I have to risk, having roots down because I'm on tour, or maybe it's, I have to go out on my own. And that was certainly something that I experienced in my career, where you start to project out. You see the world around you. You've gotten to know it for a couple years. Maybe you've participated in a handful of roles to where you're like, okay, I could do that, and that kind of gets me here, and I could do this other thing that kind of gets me over here. And then, do I have the ability to go beyond there?
Right.
And so
the next level.
To the next level.
Yeah.
Oh no, maybe I don't if I'm working within this network. And so then whether you come from an entrepreneurial background, you did, I did, or not, sometimes you sort of wake up and you're like, oh crap, I think I have to like hang out a shingle and like do my thing. And in certain industries, it sounds like music, that can be pretty hard.
Yeah. Yeah. And right. Also in the line of work that I wasn't really interested in going to get my CPA. And
big hurdle.
And there are some long-term business managers that don't have it. Maybe they have their CFP. And I went through my CFP program. I did well on the test. I did not pass it my first time, which is normal. But I was like, I don't know if I get myself to go through that again. And so for me, the transition came of going. It started out as the snowball idea of making some extra money throughout the year to going, well, wait, if I'm ever going to make this leap and change, it probably needs to be before I have a family. And at the time, I didn't have any kids. Now I look at finances a lot different, right? My risks are limited because of me. Back then, right? Taking that leap.
Your risk index is massive.
Yeah, right? And so I'm thankful that I was able to, whether I saw that in the lining or not, I don't know, but it was a big... I was thankful to have the time to when I was making that decision of what I was going to do. My wife and I had a trip to Montana, and we were going on hikes for hours and talking about it and talking about what, like, it's a life change, right? And whenever you have those life changes, you have to be ready for what comes with it. And for me, it was going, okay, I also was able to transition into real estate. I'm one of the few that probably was able to do some side work in the business management world that helped fuel my real estate business, and where I was able to kind of have them overlap a little bit, and we can get in the weeds of that if you want. Like when I left business management, it is a pretty niched thing, right? To do finance and accounting for musicians and LLCs, it's also a little bit hard to like. I can't necessarily take that experience and say like, okay, now I want to go work at a big, accounting firm. They'd be like, well, do you do commercial accounting? No, I paid bills and I handled musicians' money. It's a little bit different.
You sound like a bookkeeper.
Right? Yeah. Like, it's a little bit different. But for me, it was, I was able to do some business management on the side that paid some of the bills and helped that ease of going into a full commissioned industry. And in that, I was also able to get some deals with some of those artists.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think it's very important for this podcast that we say that the answer to all of life's questions is Montana. Like, just have that be
Go spend a week in Montana. You'll figure out life's answers.
The answer to everything. Second, I think you're hitting on this interesting concept that transition can be really difficult, especially this sort of full commission, place where maybe it looked a little different beforehand. But I think that's one of the most interesting things that I keep hearing from folks that were in music business and moving into real estate is that the relationship aspect allowed that transition to happen either more smoothly, more quickly, more successfully. I mean, undeniably, the tight-knit community of music business is the same exact framework for community and sphere that you need to have to be a successful real estate agent. And so it'll be no surprise to me if you tell me that some of your people that you were helping manage also became some of your first clients, because in managing finances, essentially this big purchase, a place to put money, a place to invest and have roots for the long term, for safety nets, et cetera, it's real estate. And so that transition, maybe even more than sort of the singer-songwriter going from music to, real estate, makes a ton of sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I have that plays to my benefit, right? Like you have to take a different approach when you come out of a different sector of the music industry, right? We've talked about some of the, like, if you're an artist and then you go into real estate, you are having different conversations with your clients than I am, right? I have that benefit, I think, of kind of claiming the finance accounting portion. Like that is the fiduciary advisor to my clients. So I think that my transition is probably a little bit easier because of that. or just how I've built my real estate business, right? I've built it on that kind of those dynamics.
It's flavors of ice cream at the end of the day. Your flavor is very mint chip, economics focused, whereas someone else who's coming out of music business is looking at it, differently. Yeah. But this concept of, you're getting your work done in the music world, during the day, and then you're really opening up opportunities, you're opening up new business, and you're opening up relationships in those after hours. There's a lot of symmetry there to real estate.
As you're now saying that again, I had that pop Tom Ferry in one of his early YouTube videos I watched when I got licensed was, we do our work during the week, we make our money on the weekends as a realtor. And that almost is exactly the same as we do our work during the day, and we make relationships that turn into business at night in the music industry. And so I think they're very relationship-based industries. And you've got to be willing to kind of go outside of run the business. It's the next level step that if you're willing to do it, you can have some success in them.
Hey everyone, it's Jake, director for the Business of Homes podcast. I hope you've been enjoying today's episode, starting with Zach's beginnings in business management, his transition into real estate, and the connective tissue between the two industries. When we return, Micheal and Zach will dive into the hardest transition from the music business into real estate, finding the right balance of guidance, and an example of Zach's music industry connections helping land a deal. You don't want to miss it. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Instagram at The Business of Homes Pod, where you can interact with us and see some great bite-sized pieces from all of our episodes. For you listeners out there, did you know our entire podcast are filmed and are on our YouTube channel? Check it out next time you want to see our amazing guests tell their stories. And are you currently watching this episode in video format? Don't forget to follow us on your preferred audio streaming service to take us with you on the go. Lastly, do you have any feedback or want to suggest someone for the show? Email us at thebusinessofhomespodcast@gmail.com. Please enjoy the rest of today's episode with Zach Opheim. Let's get back to it.
What has been one of the hardest transitions going from this sort of unique industry here in Music City over to, a completely new world of real estate?
The volatility of our market, I think a little bit plays into it of like, I can go out and get 10 clients, but because it's the biggest transaction of their life, I can only coach them and advise them so much, right? And I can go, this is a great idea. This is perfect for you. But there's a lot more of the emotion side of it in this industry, where music industry, different for creatives, different for artists. But for me, I was in the business management, right? It was accounting. It was pretty black and white. It was like, you should either do this or you can't. You can afford it. And a lot of the times we were the no guys, so it wasn't always fun, but it was still a clear answer, right? And so a lot of times now as a realtor, it's going, this house is like when we started, you said you wanted a 4-bedroom, 3,000 square foot house for 500, right? That doesn't exist anymore, but for 500. And you may go see that exact perfect thing and do your job per se. I found you that house. And it doesn't work for whatever reason.
That's interesting. Almost in music, you were a bit of a tugging on the reins, pumping the brakes just a little bit, maybe.
Less creative in a creative industry. And now, like a little bit of a flip. Yeah.
Yeah. And then also in real estate, you're maybe more on the nudge side. We don't ever want to be pushy, of course, but it's this idea that you're not, mostly as a realtor, you're not pumping the brakes nearly as much as you're kind of giving gentle nudges in the right direction. Sure. Whereas, the role you occupied was maybe a little less nudging, a little more brake pumping.
Yeah.
And so that's an interesting difference.
That is an interesting dynamic. I mean, that's a lot of what we do now, right? Is even into the thought of we present the property. A lot of times, right, we have our searches set up, but it's like, hey, here are 3 properties that I think you would like. Even that nudge, you have to be careful of like, how much do I push them to, I want you to see this property because I think it's the great property for you. But does that mean that I have commission breath? Can you smell that out? Like, you know what I mean? Like what can I say that, and our clients pick it up fast, right? It's like, okay, he has now asked me to go see that place 5 times, right? Like that's too many times. So it's finding that right balance of like guidance, but yet, right, I would like say you're steering the car. Like I'm helping us go and I'm navigating us, but ultimately it's your decision of whether you want to turn right or left. And you have to buy the house.
Or go into the ditch.
Yeah. And and that would be like coming out of the buying process, right? Like, and that is also part of it too. I think that has been an interesting change for me and that's the entrepreneur part of it, of going like, I've had friends and family that don't do deals with me, and I'm going, man, that hurt.
Oof,
or buyers that you spend a lot of time with that go, hey, we haven't found anything. We're just going to wait until next year. We're going to rent again. And that's not even anything necessarily bad against me, but it's going, ouch, that hurts my bottom line. It affects my business. And I have to kind of differentiate between being a fiduciary, being a nice guy, and being a business owner. And sometimes they overlap a little bit, and it's hard to go like, no, it's the right thing for you. I'm going to have to figure out how to live without that commission, right?
Yeah, and I can imagine that in the world of personal managers, tour managers, business managers, and music, there are also difficult decisions of how do you give guidance when you are essentially hitched to that wagon? How do you give guidance, that fiduciary sort of like pure and simple, ethical, third-party guidance? How do you give that when so much of it is still interconnected? That is in some ways you might say, specifically for real estate, that there's an unfair complexity to it. I'm not sure fairness really has any part of this conversation, but it is complex. It's an unfair complexity because it feels fun and easy to help guide others into the success of selling or the success of buying. It feels uncomfortable when the circumstances just aren't aligned.
Yeah. I mean, on the surface level, it should be all sunshine and rainbows and fun. And a lot of that is because of social media and what's portrayed out, right? There are a couple accounts now that are showing like the funny real side of real estate agents. And I think it's valid. I think it's important, right? Because if all you see is the picture at closing, a lot of the consumer are going, oh, that's all they do, right? I think we've come away from a little bit of like the real estate agent only opens the door. The hardest thing they do all day is figure out how to put the key in the key lock. I think we've come away from that a little bit, but I still think that there's a little bit of like you do whatever you want all day and, kind of you help us through the transaction, but then you're just there. And I'm like, you've never done a deal with me.
Yeah.
That's what I say to that. Right?
Sometimes I see myself sweeping up, in the office or whatever, and I'm like, I should take a picture of this, because I might be like the owner of a business or multiple businesses, but here I am sweeping, and I've seen an agent, fixing something on a house or cleaning up,
I've taken leaves out of a gutter.
Yeah. Cleaning up the mess.
Did not tell my broker I did that, but I lived to see another day.
No getting on a ladder.
Right. Yeah. I have not since.
But yes, all of those unsexy things, it is a part of the value conversation that's a familiar one on this podcast, where we talk about that you've got to give lots of value to continue to sort of operate successfully, but also defend, the reasons why you get paid what you get paid.
And how do you show that value, right? Like everybody has their own way of expressing, this is marketing that value.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
And again, music comes back to be well and easily connected to this, because it's also an industry where image is everything, and how we perceive, the world of music, how we perceive the world of real estate is very, almost certainly, in potentially ugly ways sometimes, very different than reality. And so I think it can be hard for us in real estate to both be authentic as well as showcase what we're really doing, prove value, and not have it come off as self-serving. Yeah. It's a very tight balance. Sure. Given your experience in music and now your experience in real estate, for those out there listening who have also touched the world of music, who might be interested or who are making their way in the world of real estate, what's something that you think about as sort of someone who's seen both worlds?
I think it's really staying true to yourself, right? I think real estate as a whole gives you a pretty good opportunity to market and design your business as an outshine of yourself, right? And I mean, we've talked a bunch about my clients look at me as a fiduciary. They ask me questions about their two loans they're comparing. And I think coming from the music industry, it's going what you wanted out of the music industry. If there was something that you weren't able to get out of it, make sure that you're staying true to that once you have an opportunity to do that in real estate. I think, you kind of touched on it a little bit earlier too. It's reputation is a big part of both industries. And, I have been thankful to have mentors in business management and in real estate that are very high on that too. Like the way you do one thing is the way you do everything. That's been with me since high school. And that portrays into your business so much of like, are you willing to take the high road? Like if somebody's trying to battle you through a deal, are you willing to take the high road, or are you going to scoot down to their level? And that's where I'm going. The whole point being is I think as your reputation grows within the real estate industry, the same way it did within the music industry, stay true to yourself, stay true to what you want your work ethic to be thought of, what you want your business to be thought of. The rest will follow. And I say that sitting in this chair, having gotten deals for my clients because I was able to have the conversation with the other agent on the other side and say, what do I need to do to make this work? Can I have some favorable, intangible help? I think that I was able to bring value. Maybe the best way of saying that is I was able to bring some value by my business reputation and how I've done business in the past, that they were willing to, maybe that's worth value to a seller to have a deal go smoothly. And if you're able, and it's hard sometimes from the buyer side to portray that across the table and go, we will do a smooth deal. My clients are great clients. I don't know what that's worth to you, but if it's worth something, let's incorporate that. And I know that I've gotten at least 3 deals in my career based on that mindset and based on that thought process. And I'm sure if I examined back, maybe not as clear of a deal point, but in business management, I've had that happen.
Well, you're certainly highlighting a reality that you have more agency to be an entrepreneur and build the thing you want to build and operate in the way that you want to operate in the world of real estate. The world of music, for better or for worse, is kind of a closed door in a lot of ways. It's difficult to break in. We know that sort of. And you don't have as much freedom to sort of set things up the way that you want it. You have to participate in the structures that are already there. And so I think that's one of the biggest things that I'm sure anyone who's seen both worlds is probably experiencing, and to sort of take heart. And like you said, go make it what you will. I think that's your version of be true to yourself. If you haven't been able to have as much ability to sort of make it what you want in music, then, there's a lot of opportunity to make it what you want in real estate. Yeah.
While making sure right. And I guess part of my stay true to yourself is also keep the ego out of it. Right. I mean, a funny quote that I was told very early in the music industry was don't ever learn how to play an instrument, because then you'll think you're better than the artist. And I'm on the finance side, so we have to remember that. But I was like, oh, okay. I mean, from a standpoint, I get that actually makes sense, right? And as a real estate agent also, we have to go, doesn't matter if you are only dealing with $2 million things. If you've got a $500K deal, you have to, ego has to stay out of it. We have our clients first. I think the more that we're able to do that, the better our industry will be. But I think that also, that shows to our clients. And I think that we're a referral-based business. And why shouldn't that be at the very top, if not in the top of our priority list?
This transition time, you've been in the world of music, you're making your way, you're sort of hanging out your shingle and saying, no, I'm going to kind of make this transition. And some of your first clients, you were saying, were actually in the music business. So tell me a story about one of those first deals where you were making that sort of 1 foot in 2 worlds transition into real estate.
Yeah. A great story is probably one of my first 4 deals, showing an artist a home. And oddly enough, the listing agent is also an ex-music guy, and you know him well, Chris Grimes. Shout out to you, Chris. And it was almost like we had an instant, if we can do this deal, I want to make sure you go about it right. He knew I was new, and we both had the music industry connection. We found that out because he was a guitar player for an artist that worked with my older sister several years prior. So like, right, all of a sudden we had this small knit. Thankfully, my client liked the home. We went under contract, and it was an artist's home being sold to an artist. And so
it was a home that was previously in the music world.
Being sold. And right, there's so many characteristics of homes that tie to that, right? And
I mean, like you don't just have bedrooms and offices, you also have like
studios,
trophy rooms and
privacy,
studios
and space. And like being able to not have people drive by your house is a big part for artists.
That's like a whole box to check.
I mean, right? You can maybe have a whole episode on like what an artist buyer looks like, right? But no, it was from the get-go. I found several other agents that were also in the music industry, and being able to do a deal with one early on. And Chris is also a fantastic agent outside of any connection to the music industry, right? But we were able to do that deal together. And him and I have been best friends since that deal. We have not done a deal together. Let's do one, Chris, if you're listening. But like, him and I are best friends. Like, we still really respect each other in the industry. And he's, great agents. There are a lot of great agents that have come from the music industry.
Well, it's a reminder, not just that there's some sort of secret society of like, 1 foot and 2 world people, but that the relationships that you build should create this atmosphere when you do get under contract of like, yo, we're in this together. We need to like march this ball down the field together.
I wish there was more of that across the whole industry.
Yeah.
And that maybe fits my personality a lot, right? But it's like, but I don't get paid if your deal doesn't close either, right? Like, hey, that's not a shocking revelation, right?
Yeah, mutually beneficial.
We have to get to the closing table with both sides signing, whatever that looks like. And it looks like a lot of different things a lot of the times. So, yeah.
I love it. I love these stories because the heartbeat of real estate is people, and we see that connection back to music so easily. Yeah. And these stories are always wonderful to hear. Thank you so much for being here and sharing stories and helping us continue to figure out all of these funny little connections between music and
all
real
the connections. Small city. We're still a small city at the end of the day.
That's right. All right, guys, this is Michael Conrad with the Business of Homes podcast. I am so grateful that you're here listening, and I hope that you'll smash the subscribe button to continue to hear our great episodes and our great stories. Check us out on YouTube if you want to see our lovely smiling faces, and we'll catch you next time.
Hey everyone, Jake again, director for the Business of Homes podcast. I hope you've enjoyed today's episode. A huge thank you to Zach Opheim for being a part of the podcast. Go follow him on Instagram at @ZOpheim and let him know how much you enjoyed their story. Don't forget to subscribe on your preferred listening platform, and make sure to follow us on Instagram as well at the Business of Homes pod. Do you have any feedback or want to suggest someone for the show? Email us at thebusinessofhomespodcast@gmail.com. Thank you again for listening, and we'll see you soon.